Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Criterion, where we exclusively review and preview new titles to the collection. In this edition, we look at Testament from 1983, a drama concerning the aftermath of a nuclear attack. It stars Jean Alexander and it's new to the collection on Blu-ray. Films concerning either the likelihood or the actual eventuality and subsequent aftermath of a nuclear holocaust have always proved interesting for directors, especially in the light of the Cold War in the 1980s. On the Beach, directed by Stanley Kramer from 1959. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, the classic satire from Stanley Kubrick from 1964. From the same year, Failsafe. We had John Badham's War Games, with the threat of computer-generated annihilation in 1983. The BBC television drama Threads, one of the most harrowing depictions of suicidal breakdown following a nuclear attack in Sheffield, England, from 1984. The Day After, a 1983 American television film directed by Nicholas Meyer and postulating a fictional conflict between NATO and the Warsaw Pact over Germany, which escalates into a full-scale nuclear exchange between the US and the Soviet Union. There's also The Terminator from 1984, The Manhattan Project from 1986, When the Wind Blows from 1986, a British animated feature with a naive elderly couple trying to survive the aftermath of nuclear war. Miracle Mile from 1988, The Fourth Protocol, based on the book by Frederick Forsyth from 1987. The Sum of All Fears, based on the book by Tom Clancy, and Unthinkable, starring Samuel L. Jackson and Carrie Ann Moss. And of course, more recently, Oppenheimer. Testament, directed by Lynne Littman, is a more gentle human drama, focusing on a family whose father is in San Francisco when the bomb drops, leaving the mother, her two sons, and older teenage daughter to cope with the aftermath and the inevitable radiation sickness that follows such an event. It's a routine morning where the Weatherly family of Hamlin, California, are going about their business. Dad Tom, played briefly in the film by William Devane, takes his son Brad, Ross Harris, out for a bike ride. He likes to push the lad to achieve his limits. Exhausted, he returns to greet his wife, who is trying to get the kids off to school. She has a young son, Scotty, who needs looking after with specific requirements. The father goes off on his work trip to San Francisco, and whilst they're watching television, there is a brief warning on the news that a strike is about to take place. And then a bright light fills their entire living room. Now after that, we're left with the whole town coming to terms with the aftermath of the nuclear strike. At first, not much changes, but ever so gently we see things take their effect, starting with people queuing for gas at the local garage and a central shortage of food. The local church becomes a central meeting place for the town. We're not shown the more violent side of what would be a society breakdown, an absence of authority and law enforcement, for instance. Instead, Lynne Littman chooses to show us the effect that death has on families, and in particular on Carol's family, as she starts to lose her children to radiation sickness. Now, there's a particularly touching scene in the film featuring Kevin Costner, who has a small role in the film, meeting her in the rain, carrying a drawer from a bureau that he considers to be just the right size to bury his baby in. Lynne shows us him and his wife and that child only very briefly prior to this scene, so we can identify with this poignant moment. Jean Alexander puts in an excellent performance, culminating in, of course, her frantic search for a stuffed bear she wants to bury with her young son, but in anguish, she doesn't find it. Now, the screenplay to the film was penned by John Sackett Young, based on Carol Amen's 1981 short story called The Last Testament. Carol herself wrote the story after waking up in the middle of the night, and in only a few hours she had written the entire piece, claiming it to be her own personal nightmare. Now, the film was originally produced for the PBS series American Playhouse in America, but Paramount Pictures decided to give it a theatrical release in 1983. Jane Alexander was also nominated for a Best Actress Oscar the following year. Now, her youngest son, Scotty, in the film is played by a very young Lucas Haas, actually a few years prior to him taking the role in Peter Weir's Witness. But already he was showing an empathy in his part and a clear indication that he was a capable young actor. Rebecca De Mornay also appears in the film as Kathy Pitkin, married to Phil Pitkin, as I said earlier, played by Kevin Costner. Carol Amen died from cancer in 1987, but she taught writing at area adult schools and colleges. There is a fantastic intimacy throughout Testament, one that separates it from its contemporaries. The rural setting and the geographical distance from any explosions create an eerily quiet and more insidious apocalypse. There are no shattered buildings, no firestorms, no scenes of mass carnage. Instead, all contact with civilization is lost, and the isolated Hamlin residents have little recourse but to wait and see when radioactive fallout will kill them all. It seems particularly arresting treatment for American entertainment at the time, which typically pushes for more destructive, noisy takes on the end of the world. Now, this kind of cosy catastrophe is traditionally the domain of the United Kingdom. The grim inevitability that Young's screenplay presents here, and Littman's enormously melancholic tone, run at right angles to the usual exceptionalism depicted in US film. Brad, the oldest boy, gets featured more as he bikes around visiting an old man, Henry Abhart, a CB radio ham played in the film by Leon Ames, and his futile attempts to contact anyone outside of their town for help and assistance. The film was shot entirely on location in the town of Sierra Madre in California, a suburban community of LA located in San Gabriel Valley. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 4 stars and said Testament was a tragedy about manners, asking how we might act towards one another and how our values might stand up in the face of an overwhelming catastrophe. Now, the film could easily have failed and be accused of being too sympathetic, but it just stays clear of the needless amount of schmaltz. The music score is composed by James Horner, a popular composer at the time, and it touches on the gentler side with its main theme indicating that there may be some hope ahead. Testament isn't a relative-free 89 minutes of cinema, but it now has taken its place as one of the best films about a nuclear attack, mainly because it didn't dwell on the mushroom cloud and the death and destruction caused at the epicentre, but rather what inevitably will occur out in the rural communities and the ripples there and the lasting effects of the initial event itself. Lynne Littman had previously directed documentary features prior to this, but she chose to direct Testament in a similar way and make it a realistic vision of the world we might live in after the bombs had dropped. Criterion brings this film to the collection on Blu-ray, and it contains the following special features: a new 4K digital restoration supervised and approved by the director Lynne Littman and director of photography Stephen Poster, with uncompressed mono soundtrack. New conversation between Littman and author Sam Wazon. 2 documentaries by Littman made in collaboration with anthropologist Barbara Meyerhoff. That's Number Our Days from 1976 and In Her Own Time from 1985. Testament at 20 and Nuclear Thoughts, 2 archival programmes featuring interviews with cast and crew members and nuclear science experts. Audio recording of actor Jane Alexander reading the short story written called The Last Testament, on which the film is based. We've got a trailer for the film and an essay written by author and film curator Michael Koreski. And the cover art is based on the original theatrical poster. Testament puts forth a wrenchingly humane vision of what it will mean to go on living in a shattered and a broken world. The film has a running time of 89 minutes. It's in 1:8:5:1 aspect ratio, and it releases on Tuesday the 17th of March in the US only as Spine 1303. An imprint already released this film on Blu-ray back in 2022. Imprint are an Australian distributor, and that release is still circulating and has some of the same features as are featured on the Criterion release, as well as sharing exactly the same cover art. Next time on Let's Talk Criterion, we'll be taking a look at the character study of a career criminal that's at the end of his rope. That's Claude Sauté's 1960 film Glace tout risque, getting a 4K UHD upgrade in the collection. So until then, from me, as always, it's goodbye, and above all, good Criterion viewing.